Thank you. And to help Deputy Gould on certain situations, often when the people go look for solar farms, that a lot of the farmers would say if you have a 100-acre holding and if you release more than 50 or 49% of your land holding, you lose your single farm payment. So what you had was 3 or 4 farmers coming together to make a solar farm viable. You need up to 180, 200 acres within a high-powered line to make it viable to build it. So often you'd have one company looking at one farmer and then another farmer, and by the time you finish, they'd have 3 or 4 applications trying to make the one company trying to make the whole unit viable. So that was a lot of the reason behind different applications going in at certain times. So they might get one farmer, and then they might get a second farmer close enough, and then they might try and link the 2 or 3 of them together to make the one project to make it viable. So just for your own help. Thank you, no problem at all.
You learn something new, it's a good day, isn't it?
That's it. And again, I thank the committee for all the work that you've done, and this is a field that I'm interested in myself in planning and environmental issues and with construction all my life. But a question I have for you, we're looking at, and it's on solar farms. So up to what kilowatt would you consider a small solar farm development to be exempt out of planning to a larger scale? And the reason I'm asking you is during COVID and during the high rise in energy costs, is there a certain square meterage, is there a certain kilowatt size, or what can be, will be recommended to be exempt for the likes of solar farms? Because what we have at present at the moment is, if you have, no matter what business you're in at the moment, if you decide you want to put up a 90 kilowatt solar farm, you're guaranteed that you're going to get an objection from an objection company outside of the area, not even from the area, that are objecting to all solar farms, no matter what size that they are at the moment, even if it's only to produce electricity for one building, that there's objections coming in, and then it's going into planning process. So for sustainability for small business, for sustainability for their own business, such as a hotel or leisure centre, whatever it is, what would be considered an adequate size that would be acceptable from within planning framework?
So at the moment, we are dealing with looking at updating the exemptions. So that was just out for public consultation, Deputy, and that's really in the domestic and the community sphere and the schools. So do you want to come in just to say the size?
Yeah, just to surmise, as Maria said, there's exemption rules as well that are going through the process at the moment. They deal, first of all, with domestic examples, you know, to increase the capability for domestic housing to be exempt for solars. In relation to community, industrial, commercial activities, it's the roof space effectively that can be utilised for exempted purposes, you know, subject to certain rules. Like I think it's setback. I don't have it to hand, but it's.
Would hotels come into that
yeah,
category?
Well, they're commercial.
And
I could be corrected on that, but it is commercial activity.
Just for the clarification, is for and sorry to cut across you. Just I was trying to get it right. We just say if hotels and all that areas are included in this. So if most solar farms at the moment are actually being put on fields because they're not recommended to go on roofs, because a lot of the roof designs are not capable because of the wind that they could trap from the point of view of vibrations. They're great for flat roofs with a slight slope, and that's fine. But when you have an elevated roof at 25, 30 degrees, a lot of the roofs are not designed for a state to take it. And often the wind vibration, if you went out with a sheet of cardboard on a windy day, it has a certain amount of vibration that can actually loosen slates and roofs. So a lot of them are actually going to their fields now that they have a field. Can they use the roof space of their area and transfer that to a field onto the same size and look for exemption for that?
In short, they can utilise some of it, but not all of it. I don't have the numbers to hand, but I think we can send.
We might send on, because they're the kind of technical details in the exemption. So what we'll send on is the link to the draft regulations that have been out for public consultation. But obviously, whatever has come back in terms of, we'll determine what the actual final regulations would be, and we would expect that to be in September. But we might send the link on to the chair.
In September, the planning regulations, the exemptions as a committee to
that's
have
perfect.
An oversight. Yeah.
My other one then with the planning framework and environmental framework from the point of view of County Limerick. is from the point of view from environmental. From what you have details you've got yourselves at the moment, you probably have a map footprint of Ireland as it is as a whole. You can see the weak areas where they don't have infrastructure, where they've been taken out of the local area plans because of lack of infrastructure, and for forward planning in our areas. And in the likes of Limerick, we're looking at it from a point of view of a lot of the areas do not have the proper adequate storage system. And a report that came out showed that the biggest polluter in County Limerick is actually the local authorities from the amount of storage that's going into the rivers. But it's also stopping the planning and framework for rebuilding the likes of County Limerick and in its entirety. So it's only going to areas now in our local area plans. They're only showing up the likes of towns and villages, or the towns mainly, that have a storage capacity, which is actually taking out 2/3 of County Limerick. From the point of view of infrastructure. So it puts the rest of the county at a disadvantage. Number one, for business, to encourage business into the area, to get people home, to have housing within the area, to make it sustainable for our sports, to sustainable for the local business, sustainable for the local shops. So they're at a disadvantage. So and all your records that you've seen at the moment, have you got a detailed plan that shows the weak areas and the strong areas within Ireland that need to be invested in, that could be put forward to the government and show that what the future could hold for Ireland if there was proper infrastructure put in place?
Well, I suppose, Deputy, we start from the National Planning Framework, which looks at an increase in population of 1 million by 2040, and that's paired then with the National Development Plan to look at the infrastructure, the cost of investment that has to go in to support that National Planning Framework. And obviously the National Planning Framework is based on growth of regional cities and growth of brownfield, and also growth in other areas. A huge population increase, obviously, to deal with. I was struck, I went to a conference a number of years ago, and the OECD Secretary General talked about the importance of investment not being spatially blind, that any investment had to take account of what the spatial impact is. And that was the idea of Project Ireland 2040, that you brought the National Development Plan and the National Planning Framework together. So in terms of specific infrastructure then within it, each of the different areas would be looking at, in order to deliver on the National Planning Framework, what provision is required, whether that's education, transport or water services. My understanding is that Irish Water have done capacity reviews of where there's capacity and where they need to invest, and that reflects in their National Development Plan. So obviously when it comes down through the regional and into the local authority, when you get to the County Development Plan, there's an assessment to be made in the 6-year timeline of where there's capacity, where there's going to be investment, where there needs to be development, and how can that be sequenced. So it's always trying to make the best of the resources that you can to meet that. So it will never be that 100% can be done. But I suppose what we're certainly from a planning perspective, we're anxious to ensure that there's sufficient land that is zoned and serviced for the needs, whether that's residential or jobs, that there is a second tier probably of lands which is zoned and is serviceable in the period, and that we're consistently looking at that period. So I know that there are always challenges. We deal within the planning side of the department with the town centre first perspective, and I know that Irish Water particularly have a towns and villages programme. So we're really interested, in that development in towns as well as the cities to make sure that they grow. And we know we've had quite a discussion earlier in the year, I think, around urban development. So I think there'll always be gaps, but the question is, there's significant, I think it's 165 billion. It's a lot of resources going in. It's making the best use of that resources in the time available.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.